mystery, unlike any of his other books, and the other being that it also contained the sorcerer's topic of topics, the sorcerer's secret, which is of the flyers, the inorganic beings that feed upon our awareness. And I believe that Castaneda didn't want to release this information until the right time, and that time turned out to be after his death. Okay, so now back to Art of Dreaming. In Art of Dreaming, Castaneda encounters a being known as the Tenant. And the Tenant is an old seer who has made a deal with the Nahas of Castaneda's line, of Don Juan's line, to exchange energy for information, for knowledge. Essentially, the Tenant is an old seer, like many of the old seers, who has chosen to retain personal identity, and who has ended up trapped by that choice, that rather than cross the abyss, let's say, Crowley's terms, and allow the self to be dissolved and enter into infinity, which is burning from the fire within in Castaneda's terms, the old seers attempt to harness the power of the abyss while retaining their personal selves. And to do this, they have to avoid the dissolution. They have to find ways to move their assemblage point to positions that will keep death at bay, so they can become effectively immortal. If they never have to die, then they never have to face the dissolution, they never have to face the consequences of their actions. This is a tricky thing to describe. I have to refer the reader to the Castaneda books that cover this subject, which is The Fire from Within, particularly, but also The Power of Silence and Art of Dreaming. So essentially the Tenant is one of these, but he had a specific, and the old seers, that generally the way that they attained this was by becoming inorganic beings. Some of them even turned themselves into trees, according to Castaneda. They would move the assemblage point to positions that were so far from the human band that they would actually change the shape of the energy body and effectively make themselves impervious to death, at least for large periods of time, because the inorganic beings can live for thousands and millions of years. And so the old seers have attained this sort of limited immortality, and this is inseparable from their inability to let go of the ego or the personal self. And so they're aberrational beings, and as Don Juan tells Castaneda in Fire from Within, I believe, the old seer's bid is for dominance over everyone and everything. The old seers have been around for thousands of years, by definition. If this is their bid, their power, control and dominance over everyone, then it's safe to say that they've been working to attain this degree of control and dominance for thousands of years. And so, as I said to Neil Kramer the other day, we never got onto this subject, the true power in this world are not the Masonic sorcerers, and certainly not the global elite, but those who are behind the scenes of this power structure, which we're able to just about map in the realms of parapolitical research, who are actually pulling the strings of the Masonic sorcerers, who are pulling the strings of the global elite. These are the old seers who are not Masonic, though they may use the Masonry, Freemasonry may come from and be a distorted or more literalized system that is drawn from the knowledge of the old seers, who would go back to Atlantis and beyond. But essentially the old seers would not be human anymore. They would no doubt overlap with Ike's reptilians to some extent. The old seers have made a pact with the inorganic beings to gain immortality, and for themselves relative immortality, and in return they provide the inorganic beings with food, with energy. So this is how sorcerers attain power, is by turning demons into allies. And this has been done on a mass level. Large groups of old seers have organized and well, I'm getting sidetracked now. This is a very large subject, and I could talk about it so many different ways. This is a subject that we need to take lightly. We need to kick back with a glass of wine and a bowl of nuts and just take this as a bedtime story, not as literal truth. Because we're entering into the realms of imaginal, where there is no literal truth, or rather what we perceive as literal truth is actually a fabrication, a narrative that's been created by these beings. And so anything that we say about these beings is going to inevitably be shaped by and dependent upon the narrative that has been created by them. Our ideas of them is coming from them to some extent, even though they are attempting to prevent us from thinking or talking about them at all. If they're not able to do that, then they've at least ensured that our paradigm, our interpretation system, what we call reality, is going to inevitably shape our understanding of them in such a way that it's going to make it hard to fully understand what they are and what we're talking about. So bear in mind that this can only really be understood if we first of all accept that nothing that we think that we know is true. So this is a meta-narrative that is required to understand the narrative that we are living. Okay, so to get back to Art of Dreaming, and the reason I brought up the tenant. The tenant is an old seer who's different from the rest. He doesn't seem to be on a bid for power and dominance, but he is caught in a cul-de-sac, and he's unable to let go of his personal identity and allow himself to dissolve, because that would be complete annihilation for him rather than freedom. And so all he can do is try to hold on as long as possible, and this is true of the old seers also. But the tenant appears to be less aberrational, in the sense that he's not a vampire simply leeching off the life force of others. Instead, he has made a deal with the Nahals that they will give him energy, and he will give them the knowledge of the old seers, which is basically positions of the assemblage point. And according to Don Juan Matus, this is really a deal with the devil, because the knowledge of the old seers is very dangerous to the new seers, that is Don Juan's lineage, essentially because it has that flavor, the pertinence of the old seers, which led to their downfall. And so this knowledge, these positions of the assemblage point, potentially could derail the line of sorcerers, of the new seers that Don Juan belongs to. And this, I think, to some extent happened with Castaneda, that he was the last of the lineage, because that knowledge was brought to the world through his books. And so that was the way that the lineage was ended. But it also ended, in a sense, with a warning, which was Castaneda's life and his death, the danger of knowledge. And Castaneda, according to his own books, did have an affinity for the old seers, whose bid was for power, and Castaneda fell prey to the third enemy of the man of knowledge,